Today we're going to show you how to build this gnome or elf. We're calling it a treehouse. So let's get started.
And I found this oak stump that was probably dug out of the ground many years ago. And I saw that and I thought, you know, that's perfect for my little gnome house or gnome treehouse. And then I cut into the oak with the saw and inserted this first. It's about 2.5 inch diameter little piece of birch off of a limb. And then I cut some small ones for steps so they can go right on down.
And then you started gluing these steps on. You started up here.
Yep.
And then stacked up wood here to support that, and then used either yellow wood glue or white all-purpose glue, he can't remember, which is fine, and then supported that, let it set for the recommended time that's on the glue. Once that dried, then glued this one on, and he's covering about maybe 1/5 of it on the glue surface where these overlap, and then just worked his way all the way down to the base here.
And then we drilled a hole in here so that the gnomes can climb up through there.
What did you use to drill that hole?
Well, I tried using a hole saw, and that didn't work so good, so I used a drill. And then you drill in 2 or 3 little holes, and then you take your little saber saw, get the right teeth, and you cut that round circle.
And then these screws here are what go through the birch and then into the oak, and it's the same way on the bottom.
3-inch long screws.
Yep. You know, it's a pretty, because this is pretty heavy actually, because oak is, these are both
10 pounds.
hardwoods, and they get heavy. Yeah, this is the ladder that Dad put together. This is actually made out of buckthorn, which is an invasive species. So he cut that down, which they usually, towns want you to cut it down because it takes over the native species and stuff. But he took a board, laid this down first, or flat on a 3/4 board, and then he put finish nails.
Little finish nails.
Yeah, 3/4 inch, 1/2 inch.
Oh, yeah, about
on 3 sides
about
of
an
that.
inch long.
Yeah, and then measured where he wanted to put the rungs, and then glued that, let that dry. And then I said, well, I would like to have string on there. And he said that was the hardest part of the project, to sign the string, but he's got huge fingers, so not easy to do. But yeah, he's huge hands. But then this fits right through that hole and then down to this landing right here, so then the gnomes can go up. And we're using these gnomes as a guide, and this is primarily designed for this little guy, which is the child gnome that's maybe 7, 8, 9 years old, and this is the adult. And this guy's probably maybe 3.5 inches tall.
And he's about 4, give or take 4.5 inches tall.
Yeah, so the scale, this is built for the little guy. So that's pretty much the base. And there was a spot, the seam ended up being right here. So what Dad does, I said, no, that doesn't fly. So what he did is he just took some birch bark, kind of like this piece here, put some glue on there and cut it on, and you can actually still see a nail there. That needs to be fixed, and that's pretty much it for the base. You know, you can design it any way you want. This is probably about 1 foot tall, and then we're gonna go on to the building. This is a log cabin that Dad built. It's a model years ago, and this is setting up on top of the gnome house. And Dad's going to describe how he built it.
Well, first thing I always do, we cut out a board. It can be most anything, but just get a floor plan. And then...
And that's plywood?
It can be plywood or...
Plywood's the most stable.
Yeah. And then I put these logs around the edge just to cover up that piece of wood and make a nice foundation. And here I use some small little sticks for the whole floor and the porch. And put some logs up here just mostly for looks, but it strengthens these posts. It holds up the porch.
Got it?
Yep.
You have to hold it over
then-
here.
All these logs, where I live, I can go out and get these little sticks. They're invasive species.
Invasive.
They're called buckthorn. And they work real nice for little log cabins.
And these, the bark's been all peeled off.
Yep. Peeled bark.
And these you used carrot or potato peeler, but you found that a Dremel tool now works better with sandpaper.
Sanding disc.
Around sanding disc.
Takes it faster and easier
Okay.
than a potato peeler.
Good, thanks.
This is a fascia again on a roof board underneath.
And those are full logs.
These are full. They're not split.
And they're put on before the shingles are put on.
Yep.
And tell us about the chimney.
Then the chimney, I always liked a chimney on a building. So I built a small little, maybe 1/8 inch, 1/4 inch, this looks like at least a 1/4 inch thick, and a structure of sorts. And then it goes up, it can go up through between the roof and go on up. And then I go out on, the best place I find to pick up these little rocks is on the beach, on a lakeshore beach. They have so many colors. You got reds and whites and browns, and
what do you use to put those on with?
then I just use a gray regular caulking.
With silicone or acrylic?
It's probably acrylic.
Okay.
And you put that on and you can cover, you could cover the whole thing if you had time to put the rocks on.
Well,
But I'd cover about half of it, and I'd do another half, and then I'd do the chimney.
you'd cover half with caulk and then put the stones into that.
Yep.
Okay, and then let it dry probably a day. Okay, then finish that up.
On this one, I didn't put the inside in. My bigger log cabins, I even, on the inside, I have the fireplace, and I put rocks
Yeah.
in there,
Yep.
so
Okay.
it looks pretty nifty.
How did you stack up the logs? Let's show on this side.
Well, you have to stagger the logs, thick end, thin end, whichever, and then you stagger. So you got a thick end here and a thin end, a thick end and then the thin end. And then just stagger them up, and you try to keep, you take a ruler and you keep measuring every 3 to 5 courses so that you make it even all the way around. So when you get to the top, everything is the same height.
How did you install the logs?
Then these logs, I glued the majority of them. I glued them together. Now I just stacked them up one by one. You could make a whole wall, but it's pretty hard to do if you're going to pick this overlap.
Yeah, you couldn't do that.
And that'd be almost impossible.
You'd have to do one row. You have to do one row at a time, all the way around, and then start the next row all the way around, the next row. You couldn't build a wall this way because these wouldn't necessarily line up.
No. These windows, you can do 2 things. You can get up this high, and then I cut these logs to fit. But if you had difficulty doing that, you can put the logs all the way across, take a little, I use a hacksaw, and I saw down and take the piece out. And then I get up here, and this is the last row. Well, I think there's 2 rows. And then I start the gable end. And I put the gable end up with logs, and I let them extend over 1/2, 3/4 of an inch, and then I cut them all at once.
Did you cut it on here, or did you build this triangle on the table?
No, I think I built it on the table.
Yeah, and then you cut it, and then you glued this whole top triangle on the
Onto
top
it,
there.
yep.
And then the roof is just glued on to these log walls, because they're fairly wide. They're
Yep.
maybe somewhere 3/8
Yeah.
diameter. And then,
Works good.
yeah, good. And then this is a cedar shingle
shingles.
roof. Start at the bottom, do a row across,
Yep.
next row all the way up.
When you buy these shingles, one shingle is almost as big as two of these. Maybe not quite. And then they're 1.125 long. So I had to cut everything down for this size of building.
Yeah, for the scale
you
to look right. If you
get a
put big
decent
shingles on here, it doesn't look right,
No,
because it's
no,
not the scale.
It's just way too big. And then on the very top, you put a cap. And
Yeah.
those are just a little bigger than these, but not much.
Boston Ridge, yep.
Boston, yep.
Okay, great, thank you. Yeah, that turned out looking really nice. That's one option for Gnome Treehouse. We'll
Yep.
show you another option next. And then this is option number 2. That's up on top of the treehouse, and then we'll discuss how it was put together. It's actually still being put together. Dad had started putting the roof on. This is probably 3/16 inch plywood. But then I had him stop because I wanted to have him show you how he did this interior structure. But let's start at the floor first, and then let's work our way up.
This is similar to the other cabin. And it's this is plywood,
Looks like,
half-inch thick.
yeah.
Can be a quarter, depending on what you want to work with. And then I started attaching the boards with a 45 in each corner. And that's what your preference is. 45s can be very tricky, and you could butt join them, but then you'll see an end piece like this. And I didn't really care to see that.
Well, and what you could do is put a real thin, like maybe a 16th inch
You can.
thick balsa wood or something. You could put a trim on here to cover up those corners too.
You can put trim on. Most
So-
big share houses are.
So you glued this bottom board on the outside of the plywood base,
Right.
and then did you start gluing these up, or were these put together flat on the table?
No, I glued these the same way I did the logs. I did one at a time all the way around.
Okay, and then just worked your way up.
Yeah.
And then you came to a window.
Yep.
Did you put them up to here and then cut out the opening, or did you
Yep.
cut piece? Okay, so you cut those out. So you could do
You
it
can
either
do it
way.
either
You could
way.
cut, yeah, okay.
It
And then-
might be easier for you to cut them out.
These windows, the grids inside are actually hardware cloth, metal.
Yep.
But they look great, and they look like weathered wood, so that, we thought for scale, that looked pretty good. And then there's actually a piece of real thin plastic, like off of a spinach container
Yep.
or
That's
whichever.
just what it was.
And that just adds that little detail that makes all the difference. And then the trimmer on the window looks good. And then this gable end, the boards here run horizontally, but these run vertically. And didn't you lay these down and glue them together?
Yes, I did.
And then determine what your angle was, cut that, and then you glued it onto the wall.
I cut out that pattern, and I just marked a line here, knowing the top.
And you originally made a pattern out of cardboard for this whole
did.
house, just to see how scale looked and roof angles and everything. And that's kind of a good idea, because then you can kind of see, okay, where do we want to put the windows, what size, what height.
Then the door, the best thing that I do is determine the opening size, which is just a little, very little, almost the same size as the trim. The trim just goes on and covers on top of these.
So there's a
covers
door jamb.
Yeah, door jamb. And then I put a door stop in there, so the door just goes so far. But as I work my way up, first thing I do is drill a hole and I use a pin, and they're about this long, and I cut about a half an inch off of there, and I have put in the drill, I put tape around this
Yeah,
because
because
they're so small.
the chuck
The chuck
otherwise
hold
won't
it.
grab it. So what kind of tape did you use?
I just used masking tape. And I had a piece about as long as my finger, which is about 3/4 to an inch long. I put that in the drill. I have a portable battery operated drill. And then I'm able to drill into the base, right into the corner of the door, in about a 1/16,
And that's
and then just the width of the door.
and
right
that's
in the
done
middle.
before you even start putting the walls up.
That should be done right away.
Well, it has to, because otherwise you
Because you
can't get
can't
in.
get
You
a
can't
drill down
drill
there.
it. So that whole you have to figure out this whole door before you even start putting up the walls and the door jamb and the trim and everything.
Right.
You need to determine what the size is going to be, and then how far over did you drill it? About 1/8 of an inch.
No, it's no more than 1/8, maybe barely 1/8 of an inch.
But there it depends on scale too. This is how high? Is this 5 inches?
This is about 4.5 inches high here.
Okay.
And then you work your way up, putting on the siding, or the walls, whichever you want to call it. You get to the top, and then you have the hole drilled into the door, and the pins put in. You put pins,
Yeah, and you're
just these
using
little, just these, I just cut them with snips, about a 1/2 inch long. One in the bottom, one in the top, boom, boom. And then this piece goes on with a hole drilled in there in exactly the right place. And then you slide that down.
and that's
into the
probably
door.
about 1/8 inch over. The same as the bottom. You want
Yep,
I want those the same. So
They
that,
have to
but
be the
this
same.
door opens and closes great. Hits the, but you need to actually put the pin in the bottom of the door and then push it down into this bottom piece,
yep,
setting the door in there. And then before you put this piece on, Dad, put the pin into the door, and then there has to be a hole drilled up into this piece too, and then that gets pushed
Yep.
down, and you need to put the glue on here and push that down onto the pin. And it's tricky, but the doors
Mm-hmm.
aren't real good. I've seen a lot of them where people will use leather hinges, and they kind of flop around, and the doors don't fit real well. And then this handle is just a small piece of a twig, tree branch. And this one I thought was a little bit lower. I thought it should have been up about a 1/2 an inch higher for scale and things. But and then Dad also, I don't know if you can see it down in there, he made a picture frame out of logs, well, little sticks. He split the sticks in half, cut 45s on the corners, and then he actually glued that picture to the wall. Just because once this is all together, we won't be able to get inside. But then, Dad, you explain this roof system and why you stain that color.
I stain this so that when I put on the shingles, you just see black, and you don't see, it looks like just one big piece. And then I had to design these logs or dowel rods so that I had something to support the top of this roof, and then the top of this roof, and then this side and this side. So I put a piece of wood in here just for strength for the end walls on both sides, just to give this some strength, and they give me a bigger gluing surface. And then this distance here was kind of tricky. So before I put this on, I put this template back about this far, and then I lined up from here right along and saw the template, and then I marked with a pencil where that should be cut. And then I cut that off, then I glued onto the ends, and I glued this part. I actually made a flat spot right in this log so that I could glue it, and then I'd put a nail in.
Hold on to it.
The whole thing was
Hold it.
nice and sturdy. And then, I believe at that point, we make cardboard as templates. And this lines up with this, and when you cut the plywood, you measure it to make it, be sure it's exact. And then this is the same thing. This goes on like this, not like that.
Yeah, that's got to go down.
That goes like that. This goes like
Nope, the smallest down.
like
There.
that. And that's pretty much the way it's going to look. And then the shingles go on that.
Yeah, and let's turn this and show the different shingle options.
Yep.
Originally, Dad was all fired up to put pine cone scales on until he started doing it on another thing he's working on. And then he decided he's not going to use pine cone scales because they take forever to put on and very incredibly tedious. So another option is actually, these are a bit thick. These should be probably half the thickness. And we've seen different models where people just put, these are 3/4 inch wide. You would cut for the whole length, cut that angle. And then it's almost like lap siding, and that's what they do for the roof. It's really fast and easy. That's the easiest roof to put on, but in my opinion, doesn't necessarily look the nicest. These are cedar shingles.
Yep.
And this is probably what Dad's going to put on. And you would then put on the first row, run it all the way across, cut your angles, and then the next row goes on, whatever overlap. And then you need to determine, okay, how big of shingles do I want to go for the scale of the building? And are you going to put logs on these fascias?
Yeah, this will all have logs all the way around the entire building. And then the shingles cover over the fascia.
Yeah, they will overlap.
Yeah. They overlap about a 1/16 on the bottom, and they overlap about a 1/16 on the sides.
Well, they'd come out. You're going to have a log out here, though, so
Yeah,
that'll
well,
come
the log
out
will be
probably,
there.
depending on the side of the
So
log.
you go over the log and still extend a 1/16.
Okay.
But you see the log as a fascia.
Okay. Anything else? I think that's it. Be sure and check out my other videos. Please subscribe, like, share, leave a comment below. Have a great day.